All right, welcome back to the Victory Degree podcast. If you can't tell, I'm super excited about today's interview, and for good reason. And I think you'll see. I think you'll see why here very shortly. Today's guest is Tyler O'Shea. Tyler, welcome to the podcast, my man.
Thanks, Nick. I appreciate you having me, and I'm excited to dive in.
Yeah, I think we're both very excited, which is just exciting for I think the audience because I think we're getting to a lot of really awesome topics today. I think we're going to cover a wide range of topics with sports and sports stories and sports media, all the work that you're doing. So before we get into all of that, if somebody has just clicked on this video and they see Tyler O'Shea and maybe they haven't heard of you or the work that you're doing, give us like a brief rundown of the world that you're in and everything that's kind of happening.
Yeah, my name's Tyler O'Shea. I'm a former D3 baseball player that started a website called Joker Mag, and it's dedicated to underdog stories in sports. So basically, all of the best sports stories you've never heard, we aim to cover everything around any kind of inspiring stories happening, past or present, and it's all under the theme of the underdog.
What inspired you to start the website?
Great question. So in seventh grade, actually, I was 13 years old. I got cut from the baseball team, and basically it led me down the rabbit hole. Back in those days, it was like desktop computer in my parents' room. That was the only way I can get to the internet. So just searching around, trying to find a reason or like evidence that I could like turn it around. Like I was really small. I didn't deserve to make the team. In all honesty, if I was in the coach's shoes, I would have done the same thing. And I was taking crow hops from shortstop. The bat was way too heavy for me, and I was just undersized. And so I started looking into like baseball players in the MLB that were undersized growing up and that succeeded in spite of the odds that were stacked against them. So those stories kind of inspired me, and then I ended up continuing my career, grinding it out and just progressing, and ended up playing all the way through college at McDaniel College. Was named an honorable mention all conference as a senior, and it was just kind of like after graduating, I was like, you know what, like there was something to those stories that inspired me, and I think you know sports media, we can get into this, like has gotten away from some of that, and I wanted to create a home for it. If those little 2 to 3 minute segments you'd see during Sports Center back in like the early 2000s, like the feel good stuff, that's what we're all about. And you don't have to wait and watch Sports Center for a couple hours to find it. It's all there. You can get lost in it.
I feel like there's been just in general with a lot of media and a lot of different subjects, there's just been this overwhelming negativity. Like we hear a lot with the news and with politics that we certainly don't need to get into, but that is like the most prevalent example that I feel like exists today. And it's funny because he's actually a friend of a friend who started a news site that only wrote about positive stories or
Hmm.
happy stories. So like, an example of a story would be, woman saves cat from tree or
Yeah.
something, right? Like maybe not that simple, but along those lines. And so I feel like I think people are starting to take notice that, listen, a lot of the stuff that we consume on a day-to-day basis is just filled with negativity, when it really doesn't have to be. And so people push back against that. And then people like yourself, start websites or start their own media companies that solely focus on kind of bringing out the other side, which is typically a little more positive. And it's cool to see because we were chatting right before we started. There's a lot of good that athletes do, and there's a lot of the behind the scenes stuff that usually fans don't see or doesn't get reported. Um, and it's just good to have websites like yours that kind of show that other side.
Yeah, and there's the phrase in media, like if it bleeds, it leads, and obviously negativity attracts more attention and spreads faster than positivity. It's just unfortunately the way that humans are wired, I guess. But there, like you said, there is so much good going on, and you could pick out pretty much any athlete out on the field in any game you're watching, and you could find multiple guys with like a great background, a great story, or some kind of lesson you could take away from their journey to get to where they are. Um, Even like in the front office, like you have Howie Roseman with the Philadelphia Eagles. He had no playing experience at all, and now is like the league's like greatest GM and has two Super Bowl trophies. So, so many great stories, so many things that people have overcome to get to where they are, and it extends outside of sports. And that's kind of what I want our readers to take away, even if they're not an athlete currently or they're not working in sports, there is a takeaway that you can apply to your own life in some way.
League's greatest GM, the Philadelphia Eagles bias creeps in.
The bias definitely creeps in. I mean, we did cover Brett Veach before the Super Bowl, so Kansas City a little bit. So I don't know. That's the
Yeah,
Philly in me.
I got to give you a hard time. Obviously, being a 49ers fan, we've had some tough battles in the past. Yeah, man, and it's something I talked about on the most recent episode with Todd Durkin, because he works closely with clients and with athletes, and a lot of his clients are top tier NFL MLB athletes, people like Jordan Love. He was the personal trainer for Drew Brees for a while, and so he's seen firsthand what these athletes go through, and then he's also seen firsthand how they're covered in sports media. And for me, it's always been, I really resonate with that point that you brought up, how there's so many athletes on the field whose story we've yet to discover, or whose
Hmm.
story a lot of fans don't realize. And it just adds a different layer of, I guess, fandom in a
Hmm.
way, but just adds a different layer of understanding that, hey, these people are human. And I think as fans, I can firsthand say there have certainly been times where I'm watching an athlete or I'm watching my favorite team, and I'm like, that idiot, why is he not playing better defense? Or
Hmm.
why? Like, it's just the natural fan in you kind of
Yeah.
gets. But I think if the more awareness we spread about these people's personal lives, and their journeys and discovering who they really are, I think it just adds a different taste to the sport that you're watching.
Yeah, it definitely adds a layer. And like you said, if you're watching a broadcast, you'll hear, those one-off like one-liners, especially during a baseball game, like a guy comes in from the bullpen and you'll hear the announcer say, "Oh, this guy went to a Division II or Division III school," or they'll make a little comment, but there's such a deeper story there, and that's what we aim to cover. And it does. Like I got a response from a reader recently of my Underdog newsletter, and he said, like, "You're making it fun to be a sports fan again." And that kind of is what my aim is. Like I want people that are sports fans, but also people that just want to, you know, have that other layer of the game. Like maybe they're not as interested in the box scores, but they're interested in the stories behind these people on the field, like you said.
Yeah, yeah, I I think too, as a fan, right? Like, sports are at its core, I think, supposed to be inspirational. There is a level of fun, right? It's for those who enjoy sports. It's fun to sit down with, your buddies or by yourself and just watch a game. But I think at the core, it's supposed to be inspirational.
Hmm.
And I think with today's sports media, which we kind of alluded to, it's lost a little bit of that inspiration and a little bit of that deeper meaning that kids. Because now think about it, for kids growing up, they turn on Sports Center, they turn on an NBA broadcast or NFL, pick your sport, and all they see are gambling ads, or all they
Hmm.
see is,
Exactly.
hey, the spread was 3.5 at the start of the game, and now it's 6.5, whatever, right? But they're missing. And then you turn on other networks, and it's like, who's better, Michael Jordan or LeBron? Whereas for those kids, I think it'd be a lot more beneficial for them to hear about, hey, here's how Michael Jordan grew up.
Hmm.
Or here's how LeBron, LeBron grew up with a single mother. And like, I'm sure
Hmm.
if you went to other kids who might be in a single mother household, that serves as an inspiration. Like, oh my God, like, look how far LeBron made it. I can too, instead of just seeing another gambling ad.
Yeah, and you have the Gretzky poster behind you. Like that is the essence of what I get out of sports, like the inspirational aspect. Like you used to see that back in the day. Like you used to see that on, like in traditional media, like it was the inspirational angle, and now we've gotten away from it, like you said. And we can go on a whole tangent about sports betting and how it's kind of destroyed some of the quality of what we're seeing on broadcast. But sports I look at as a metaphor for life. And like one of the quotes I see, or I have at the beginning of my book, is from Khalif Raymond, who is a return specialist and wide receiver with the Detroit Lions. And let me just make sure I get the quote right. It's the person you want to become has to mean more to you than the person you are now. And that's kind of a theme like that runs through all of the stories we cover. No matter what the situation is and whatever the person's going through, you know, the person that they were then does not define who they end up becoming in the future. And no matter what the obstacle is, they found a way to overcome it. And there's one aspect, like you mentioned, like the single mother aspect. Like there's every kind of possible upbringing that these guys have gone through, and you could find like one story that really you can relate to. So there's a little bit of everything.
Yeah, I mean, not to harp on this for too long. I just think it's so important, and it ties into a lot of the work that you're doing. Like, I'm a big fan of reading sports biographies, and I just recently read a sports biography on Allen Iverson, and whose author I'm forgetting. Kent Babb. Kent Babb was the author. Fantastic book. But Allen Iverson was one of those players that really defined an entire generation, and in many ways changed basketball and the relationship between NBA athletes and fans, really for the next crop of NBA players who came in after him. And just reading through AI's story, there's just so much inspiration to be had from his upbringing to almost being put in jail for a crime that he didn't commit, to some of the issues that he had off the court, that were certainly bad, but just all come together to create this person that is Allen Iverson. And then when you start to think about some of the things that he may have said, we're talking about practice, right? Famously, or you think about, how he went against the grain and dressed to his liking and did his own style. A lot of that stuff starts to make more sense as you start to learn about Allen Iverson. And I just think like if we can somehow, and you're doing it, but make stories like that just more well known. Again, I just think ultimately it brings back something that sports have been missing for a while.
100%. That's what we're trying to do. And, I saw you posted an AI quote earlier,
Yeah.
besides the practice quote. So that was good. Yeah, it's good to see stuff like that starting to get more traction. And like you said, we're seeing the start of a movement of, getting away from the controversial stuff, the sports betting stuff, and getting more to the root and to the heart of what sports are all about.
Yeah. Tyler, you mentioned it a little bit, but you're obviously, I view you as a savant when it comes to these stories. I think on your website you guys have over 300. You've been at it, I think, since 2017 is when the website officially started. But I'd argue that in recent years it's really picked up steam.
Hmm.
You wrote a book, The Underdog Mentality, sports stories that will change how you see the game and yourself, which is a compilation of some of these stories that you've researched. When you sit back and think about a unifying theme or trait across these different underdog stories, whether it's a single mother, whether it's growing up around gang violence, whether right, like any one of these
Hmm.
predispositions, what is there a unifying theme that you see across these different stories or a trait?
Yeah, I think it's the ability to just dig deep and ditch the excuses. Like everyone has an excuse of why they shouldn't be successful. And it depends. Like if you grew up really disadvantaged or if you grew up very privileged, you can always find some kind of excuse no matter what. And I think it's about putting it into perspective. And I think it goes back to that quote, like the person you are now, or the person you want to become has to mean more to you than the person you are now. And if you have something to strive for, you know, the guys that I think started with the cards stacked against them almost have an advantage because they're used to overcoming things and they have the tools. They build it from a young age to be able to overcome certain things. I don't know if it's fair to say that they had an advantage, but they transform those disadvantages into an advantage. And like failure becomes a fuel for them almost. And that's definitely a common theme that I see. And even there's a guy, Ryan Gusto, that we covered recently, and he just notched his first MLB strikeout. He was cut 3 times in high school, and he like just was relentless. Like had this unwavering confidence, and I think that's what a lot of these guys have. Like he approached a college coach and like kept emailing him, pestering him until the guy finally caved and said, "All right, you can come down to Florida and like do the showcase." He goes to the showcase and the guy's like, "Who is this kid? Like I've never heard of him. He doesn't have a high school listed under his profile. Like who the heck is he?" And he says to him like, "Yeah, I got cut this year in high school. I've been cut like 3 out of 4 years, but I want to come and like win you a championship." And the coach was just like baffled, like, why? How is this kid like saying this to me right now? Like, how is this possible? And just the confidence can really carry you through, like, and get like knock down those doors that other people might be too scared to push down. And now this guy's in the MLB, and like where the high school kids that made his team that he got cut from, I don't know where they are now, but this kid just believed in himself the whole way and had the confidence to continue to press forward.
Yeah, it reminds me. There. He's most prevalent on Twitter, but George Mack, who writes amazing essays. I don't know if you follow him. He recently had one about high agency
Hmm.
and this idea that uh, the world is a lot more available to you than you may think, and high agency people, in spite of what might be going on around them, they find a way to kind of push through and make things happen. Um, and it was interesting because in the essay he kind of talks about, again, just this ability to will the world to your liking,
Hmm.
and how you can do that. And it reminds me a lot of athletes where, you brought up the example of this baseball player where, he was cut 3 times. He could have easily given up and said, hey, this isn't for me, but he still found a way and still kept pushing through, which again I think is inspiring.
Yeah, and I think that essay perfectly aligns with this whole theme. Like that's what it comes down to. People have different ways of saying it. We call it the underdog mentality, but other people call it high agency or whatever it might be. 99% of kids probably would have given up. Their parents probably would have told them to give up if why like you'd never played varsity baseball. What makes you think you're going to play in college or the pros? Like this kid just said, I refuse to believe that. Like I know I can do it. And that's really what it comes down to. You see the phrase on Twitter like you can just do things. That's like kind of going around now. Like you can just make things happen for yourself. Like closed mouths don't get fed. That's what they say, and that's kind of what it is. Like you just have to vouch for yourself and have like unrelenting confidence in yourself to keep pushing forward.
Yeah, and one of the other things that I was reminded of in that essay, he basically outlines where if you have a problem, basically trying to prove the point that any problem is solvable, and so unless it defies the laws of physics, the problem can be solved. And so again, that reminds me of a lot of athletes where, listen, maybe it hasn't worked the first time, the second time, third time. It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that it won't work the fourth or fifth time.
Hmm.
And just because you come from a certain area or from a certain background, unless it defies the laws of physics, it's possible. So I'm curious too, Tyler. Like as you research these stories, as you go through this, like how has it impacted your life personally? Like how have you seen growth in any area of your life from reading these stories?
Yeah, I mean, career-wise is probably the first thing that jumps out. Like I started this website knowing nothing about websites, about writing online, about digital marketing, and you kind of have to learn all that. And I'm sure you've seen it yourself with your podcast and social media. Um, you kind of learn things as you go, and that's kind of the theme of the stories as well. Like it all aligns with kind of my personal trajectory. Um, and so, this has led me to a career in SEO, search engine optimization, and I've grown pretty quickly in my career because I have this project. That's kind of a side project that I want to turn into my full-time business someday, a full-blown media company. But also just personally, like it just shows, I'm in the weeds searching, like researching these people every week, and it really is like it's always different, and you always see like the same recurring themes, but it is an always a different story and always a different way that they got to their end goal. And I think that's been really rewarding. And then also just my newsletter audience, my book readers, like people that have responded and reached out. Like I always say, the numbers are great. Like I love to see, 100,000 views or whatever on a certain thing, but getting like one positive message, like this changed my life or this changed my perspective or just made my day a little bit better, that means the absolute world to me. That's what keeps me going. So, you know, any metric doesn't measure up to one positive, comment or one person that's life was impacted by a story we published.
Yeah, I'm curious. You mentioned obviously being a creator, and what have you? What's been the toughest part of that journey for you?
I would say not getting distracted. I think there's so much noise out there. If you're on social media, you're following people that, are going to give you tips, like pretend to be, influencers or um, take their word as the gospel. But it's really everything comes down to your personal journey and your personal preference. And just like the theme of a coach telling you what to do, like you have to take things with a grain of salt because not everyone knows your exact situation. I've spent so many years kind of spinning my wheels and trying different things that didn't work for my particular business. So I would say just staying the course and staying consistently, dedicated to the one project or the one thing that you want to do and getting as good at it as possible is probably the hardest thing to do now with, especially with the age of AI. Like everyone's touting the newest thing that's going to make you money or change your life, and you have to kind of stay focused on your path and not get distracted.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Not getting distracted is to what you just said, almost impossible. But I always think back to Alex Hormozy had this quote where he said, "Before you start anything, you have uninformed optimism, uh, and then when you actually start a project, it turns that uninformed optimism turns into informed pessimism."
Hmm.
Where you now realize you now have more information about how difficult it is what you're trying, truly trying to do. Because at the start, everyone's optimistic. Oh, I'm going to start this podcast, and it's going to get 100,000 downloads in a month, and everything's going to be great.
Hmm.
And then you start to realize, like, oh, this is actually a lot tougher than I think. But then you see that other shiny thing, right, where it's like, oh, I could go, start an agency. But then
Yep.
again, you're restarting the cycle of you now have uninformed optimism, and then you start the agency, and you're right back to. So I think getting through that difficult part, that pessimism, and trying to make it out the other side is, at least for me, has been um, one of the hardest parts. But also, like I've realized, a lot of it has to do with my expectations.
Yep.
And so if I expect that, again, this podcast is going to get 100,000 downloads in a month, from me starting it, then I'm probably going to be disappointed because that's probably not going to happen.
Hmm.
So I don't know. It's such an internal game, like, just with your mindset. Yeah, it gets
Yeah,
crazy at
I
times.
mean, it's like the shiny object syndrome, people call it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you have as well. Like, I've come across so many like creators that reach out to me and they're like, I'm so excited to start this new thing. It's going to be great. And then you check in like 3 months later and it's like, oh, I didn't make time for it. I didn't stay consistent. Especially in the podcast world, you've probably seen so many people that start a podcast, realize how much work it is, you know, not only preparing like you've done hours of prep, you've read my entire book before we've even done this interview, you're putting the time into the interview and then you're spending time in post production, then you're cutting it up, you're putting it out on socials. um, so much work that goes on behind the scenes into all these things, and you have to really love what you're doing to continue to do it effectively and to stay consistent with it.
Yeah, I just think that, again, I want just the uninformed like that truly changed my entire mindset because
Hmm.
people, like, of course, starting a podcast sounds like a great idea, and having people on that you're genuinely curious to, find out more about and to talk to them, it's a fantastic idea. Like, getting paid to talk sounds amazing, but guess what isn't amazing? Everything that you just said, right? All the hours that the people don't see. I had a great time reading your book, but there's
It's
stuff
hours.
like, right, yeah,
Yeah.
but stuff like editing, the post production work that you mentioned, I absolutely dread. And so, how do you handle those things, right? And how do you get through that? And that's all part of your journey. But yeah, I I don't want to sound. I don't want people to hear this and then get discouraged and be like, well, it's not even worth it. It's worth it because, in my opinion, the journey is all you have. And if you
Hmm.
enjoy the journey, if you truly enjoy building stuff, then you're just gonna have fun either way. And
100%.
if, to your point, you very clearly believe in what you're doing and you believe in the mission that Joker Mag is trying to accomplish. And in times of tough, I'm sure that you use that mission as a guiding light, to kind of get you through some of that, some of those bad days.
Yeah, and I don't want to discourage people either. Like this leads to some cool stuff. Like you've interviewed Josh Dobbs, like a lot of really cool people that you never would have otherwise probably come across or been able to talk to through this channel that you've created. So same for me. Like I grew up watching the movie The Rookie, with Dennis Quaid, about the story of Jim Morris, who was a 35-year-old rookie. He was a high school coach, science teacher. His team convinced him to try out for, an MLB team. He ended up making it, getting called up and playing in the big leagues. I got to interview him twice for my podcast. I used to have a podcast, and I went the route of writing the written word, but I got to meet him and speak with him multiple times. That was like a childhood idol of mine, a hero of mine. Been able to interview World Series champions, Super Bowl champions, like so many cool people and inspiring people that you come across in this world. And you don't even have to be like have a huge audience to like connect with these people because people genuinely want to share their story. That's why I came here to talk to you, like, and you're going to talk to the next person, the next person, like people all want to share their stories, and you're going to meet a lot of really cool and interesting people along the way if you stay consistent in building whatever project you're building.
That's a really good point. I've quickly found out that people love talking about themselves, and if you're just willing
Hmm.
to listen, to your point, it could lead to some great things. Tyler, I want to bring us to this real quick. I had asked you what traits or what trends you see with a lot of these stories, and I was reading a lot of the articles that you guys have up on Joker Mag in preparation for this podcast. Not only in preparation, but also because I thoroughly enjoyed the work that you guys are doing. And this quote stuck out to me from Jimmy Butler. So, for those unfamiliar, we'll put the link in this show description to the Jimmy Butler story on jokermag.com. Um, Jimmy Butler was essentially kicked out of his home at the age of 13. His mom kicked him out. He was couch surfing, staying at friends' houses for a while until one of his friends' moms, I think, their family took him in, and that's kind of how he grew up. But before the 2011 draft, you guys had this quote in here from Jimmy, and Jimmy said, "Please, I know you're going to write something. I'm just asking you, don't write it in a way that makes people feel sorry for me. I hate that. There's nothing to feel sorry about. I love what happened to me. It made me who I am. I'm grateful for the challenges I've faced. Please don't make them feel sorry for me." And that was a trend I noticed with some other athletes as well, where they said, "Hey, this, yes, it was tough, but it made me into the person I am today." So almost like this, like acceptance and just understanding that they are who they are because of their story.
Exactly. And that's like amazing perspective from Jimmy Butler, especially for a rookie coming into the league to be able to say that. That just shows so much maturity. And I know, the headlines will say of how much a diva he is and all that stuff, but like the fact that he's here and a superstar in the NBA, like what he went through, that perspective is phenomenal, especially before he's even entered the league. Um, but yeah, that's something you see with everyone, and it goes back to like they learn these lessons early on, they take it with them, and it carries them to, beyond where most people would think they can go, and they believed in themselves the whole time, or they found that belief along the way, and that's what really counts.
I'm curious. I handpicked a couple quotes that really stuck with me from some of the articles, and then we'll get into the book and some of the insights there. But on the topic of belief and self belief, CJ McCollum had this quote that apparently he had a self recorded voice memo that he would wake up to every morning. And the
Hmm.
voice memo said, "I will average 20 points per game. I will get a Division One scholarship, and I will go to the NBA, and I'll do whatever it takes to get that." Uh, it, thoughts?
It's just phenomenal. I mean, I was thinking about running that story again because our audience has grown so much, and now I think I'm going to this weekend. He's just phenomenal, and he talks about like I forget what the exact phrasing is, but like unrelenting self-belief or borderline like delusional self-belief. He talks about that because there's a picture that you can look up of him on Google Images, like how much smaller he was than every other kid on the court. Like there's one of him dribbling, he looks like he's 10 years old and everyone around him is 17, 18, like monsters, and he's like 5'2", dribbling and like moving past all these guys. Um, and that's a common theme. Like that's something that I see a lot in a lot of the stories that we've covered is guys set goals for themselves. And that's like taken to the extreme. His little voice memo, that's just on a different level. But people like that put in the work, and a lot of the work that we were talking about even with the podcast, like the work that goes on behind the scenes to make something. Everyone wants to talk about an overnight success, and there really is no such thing. um, and nothing worth having comes easy, at least in my experience and from the stories that we've covered, and that just proves it.
Yeah. I have to throw this quote in here too from Ben Wallace on the topic of motivation and self belief. Which my earliest memories of Ben Wallace was obviously at the '04 Pistons, and I remember as a kid, like I always wondered, like I was like, this guy is so undersized. Like he was like 6'9",
Hmm.
like on a good day, probably more like 6'8", and he's playing center and he's guarding Shaq and he's winning Defensive Player of the Year. I'm like, I distinctly remember asking my dad, I was like, how can like a 6'9" player play center? Like, isn't he too small? And I read your the article about Ben Wallace, and his quote just blew me away. So he said, so this is after not getting drafted in the NBA. He said, I went back to the gym that night. I was on a mission to let everyone know y'all missed one. And I did reps on the bench press to everybody's name that was called in the draft until I gave up. So it was whoever, AI, Sharif, Jermaine, Ray, Kobe. For me, it just became motivation. It's me against the world now, my back up against the wall.
I get the chills hearing that. And that's like that's why I love like all the research we do in our stories is like to pull out insights and quotes like that. Like that just hits you and like makes the story so much better. And it's real. It's like straight from him. That's his experience, and it's just so like how does that not fire you up as a fan and just as a person? Like hearing that he turns the TV off, his name wasn't called, he goes right to the bench press and just starts repping him out. I mean that's just a killer mindset.
Yeah, just wow. And like you said, goosebumps. I got goosebumps
Mhm.
just reading it. And it show again. You think about Ben Wallace, and you think about all the things I just said: undersized, defensive player of the year, whatever. How can a guy who's 6'8", 6'9" play center? But then you read quotes about that, and you start to gain insight into his mindset, and it's like, okay, it makes a little more sense because the guy was just had so much self belief and was so motivated to be great. It's like, yeah, no wonder he ended up being great because that's what he visualized. That's what he wanted to be.
Mhm.
So again, tying back to what we were talking about earlier with, trying to gain a little more understanding of these players and kind of how they came to be. I think it's, again, ultimately just adds a little more perspective.
Yeah, and that's why it's the tagline of the book, like sports stories that will change how you see the game and yourself. It does add that extra layer to the game, like when you're seeing a guy like that, current players as well, like there is that extra layer and that extra like motivation that brought them to where they are. It doesn't matter how physically gifted you are or aren't. It's ultimately your mental toughness that's going to take you as far as you're going to go.
Yeah. Tyler, I want to bring us to your book again, Underdog Mentality. Highly, highly suggest you go pick up a copy. Link will be in the description. Um, there's obviously a ton of great content in here, and I certainly don't want to give away everything because that you want to buy the book to see the rest. It's well worth it. But I did want to pick out some chapters that stood out to me, and I was hoping we could just have a discussion on kind of what you learned and takeaways. The first one that stuck out to me is obviously MJ, Michael Jordan.
Hmm.
Um, I recently read, he has a book that not many people know about that he wrote himself. And I want to say it's called Driven from Within, or
Wow, I
of
didn't
course,
I
I'm,
didn't even know about that. Researching him, I didn't even know.
yeah, it's gonna kill me now, so I have to look it up. But it's while I look it up, it's a book he wrote himself. I think he released it in '05.
Okay.
And it's a short book. It's not it's not a picture book, but it's not a, I guess, chapter book per se.
Hmm.
Um, and super insightful. I mean, he talks about his childhood, and then there's certain paragraphs where like his mom will be talking and describing MJ as he was a little kid. And it was cool because like you learn this different side of Michael Jordan. Everybody talks about the motivation, the self belief, but then you find out that as a child he had really none of that. Like his
Hmm.
confidence wasn't that great. His mom actually in one part of the book talks about how if Michael Jordan hadn't found hadn't played basketball, he would have been nobody because he had trouble staying motivated. He was super lazy, but the reason basketball worked for him was that he viewed basketball as just playtime. Like to him, basketball was just something that he did for fun, and then ultimately that's what kind of kept him practicing, kept him playing, and then snowballed into what became Michael Jordan. Um, but again, it was interesting to find out that, MJ wasn't always MJ. I mean,
Hmm.
obviously, but he certainly had a different side. And as I look up what this book was called, because now it's gonna Driven from Within. Yep.
Okay, you
Um,
nailed it.
yeah, I know. Surprise. Memory's not going bad yet. um, but anyways, you have a chapter in the book titled "Fact or Fiction: The Truth About Michael Jordan Getting Cut in High School."
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, this is something that was lingering in my mind for a long time because you hear it like people will say, "Oh, Michael Jordan got cut in high school," and I just kind of followed my curiosity and I just looked into like all the quotes. Like he did so many talk shows over the years when he became like a superstar. And then I tracked down stuff from Sports Illustrated back in the day. They tracked down that coach that actually cut him and got quotes from like the assistants that year. Um, just to find out like what actually happened, like what like building the picture of who Michael Jordan was at that point in time. And like you said, I think I put a couple quotes in there about like how he struggled with the ladies, like he was bullied, like he wasn't he wasn't like what you would think of when you think of like, oh, what was Michael like? What was the best basketball player of all time like in high school? He was probably just a stud on the court and like off the court, but it wasn't the case, and it kind of paints the picture that we keep getting back to of like everyone that does anything in life or accomplishes something in life, like they're all just like you and me. Like they might have physical God-given talents that are different, but it's the mentality, it's the mindset. Like not everyone started out as like a superstar. And there's another chapter I'm not sure if you're gonna touch on, but like Bryce Harper, even like people are like, why is Bryce Harper a chapter in your book? Like it's about underdog stories, and if you read the story, you'll understand why. And it's kind of the similar point. Like superstars go through struggles too. We're all human.
So, Bryce Harper was actually going to be my next topic, but the Michael Jordan piece. So, what actually ended up? So, I guess technically, he didn't get cut, or
Technically.
kind of what was the story behind that?
Yeah, so they had a bunch of returning starters and guys that were bigger than him and, kind of had seniority over him, and they split it between varsity and JV, and he was a sophomore going out for the team. Didn't really make much noise in terms of the tryouts. I think it was like 2 or 3 day tryout. Um, and didn't make the varsity team. Saw his name wasn't on the list. He was on the JV team, and kind of went home. Like I think he had to go through a whole day of class that day, and it just was weighing on him so much. He just wanted to go home, so he went home. At the end of the day, locked himself in the room and just said he cried for like hours, and he didn't want to hear anyone. Like he didn't want anyone to hear him crying. He's like for some reason that meant a lot to him, like to just kind of have that moment to himself. And that's kind of where like the Michael Jordan we know was like built. Like that's where it started. And I write in the chapter, eventually that same gym where he saw that list without his name on it would become the Michael Jordan Gymnasium. I believe they named it after him later.
Tyler, I'm curious as we go through some of these stories. What does your research look like?
Yeah, it's something that I think makes us stand out. I think you need to find something that makes you stand out as as an independent creator of any kind, and that's something we really pride ourselves in is the deep research aspect. Um, Everything has been written about these people over the years, but like not all in one place. So I dig through like just the Jose Altuve story I published a couple weeks ago. I watched like a Spanish documentary about him that has like less than 1,000 views on YouTube, and then combine that with like articles written when he was a rookie or, when he was first signed, like quotes from scouts and like shaping that picture. Like you mentioned in MJ's book, he quotes his mother. Like I like to get all the sources possible to paint the picture of who that person is and the struggles they actually face and how they approached it, what their mindset was throughout. That's the most interesting thread to me is like what they not only what they went through and like the headlines of like, oh, he was caught here, but like the deeper level of like what was he thinking in that moment and what led him to where he is now. And that's what we always try to answer. And that's why, you know, we dig into the deep corners of the internet and find things that, other people might not be surfacing.
Speaking of digging into the deep corners of the internet, I assume you had to dig pretty deep for this, but we mentioned Bryce Harper. The title of the chapter is The Untold Story of Bryce Harper in the Most Stressful Year of His Life. What was that stressful year?
Yeah, so everyone knows Bryce Harper was the number one overall pick, but not everyone knows what got him there. And if you remember, there was that famous cover on Sports Illustrated, Bryce Harper, like high school phenom. He's the LeBron James of baseball. He's going to be the next big thing. He has all this enormous pressure. And I remember with my friends back then, like watching on YouTube, like the Bryce Harper home run derby video that was like famous. He was in Tropicana Field in Tampa Bay. Rest in peace, Tropicana Field. Um, just hitting bombs with like 500-foot home runs supposedly, and like this guy's going to be the next big thing. So he has like the weight of this expectation on his shoulders. Basically speed runs high school, graduates early, and goes into a junior college program. And the whole goal is just play one season. That'll make you draft eligible at the time, and you can get drafted by an MLB organization and start your professional career. So he's 16 years old. He goes into the fall at this college in Nevada, and it's a junior college. And he's just like completely blown away by all of the pitchers there. Like he's completely struggling, like he's out of his element. And it gets to the point where he's like, Dad, like I want to go back to high school. Like this is not, I'm not ready for this yet. So they go to his advisor and it's like, you already, like you technically already graduated, you can't come back. So it's like literally do or die. Like if you don't succeed this season in JUCO as a 16-year-old, like we don't know what's going to happen to you. So his back was basically against the wall. He took, I think, like a week or two off from fall ball, came back, like regrouped, and then just kind of turned it on from there. But his back was completely against the wall, and that's like the mindset he says now of like in the postseason, people wonder why Bryce Harper is like so productive and like so good under pressure. He attributes it to like back then, like he was created, the superstar that we know today was created back then, just like Michael Jordan crying in his room after getting cut. Bryce Harper's back was against the wall. He knew like it was do or die, and he made it happen. He said like I think his quote was like, "This is all cake now. This is the fun part. Like this is what I love to do." The stress was back then. Like everything in front of me now is just fun.
It's interesting how a lot of times in our what we perceive to be, our most terrible moments or our worst moments in life, oftentimes lead to some of the best moments that we ever have. And we see it with athletes all the time. I'm sure you've experienced it personally. I've certainly experienced it personally, where in the moment you think to yourself, wow, this is, I'm rock bottom, this is the worst thing that could ever happen. And then some amount of time later you look back and you're like, wow, actually that was the best thing that had to happen for me to be the person I am today. So
Mhm.
it's another reason why we love sports, man. So many relatable stories.
It is, and
um,
you're making me revisit like a lot of these things that I haven't visited in a long time. I haven't even like sat down and read my own book yet because I just spent so much time on it, and it's like you're bringing the memories back, and I'm getting chills with some of these quotes.
well, good. Well, I'm glad. We mentioned his name, your unbiased take that Howie Roseman is the best GM in the NFL. But in all seriousness, I mean, he's if not the best, he is top two.
Mhm.
At just what he's been able to do with the Eagles from a roster construction perspective and keeping them as relevant as they have been. Obviously, winning the Super Bowl this past year, um, but he had probably a very weird path that he took to becoming GM, and one that was perhaps unconventional.
Yeah, and you see it today. Like you see John Elway, like John Lynch, like all these guys with like playing backgrounds, and um, it kind of seems like some people say like the NFL is like an old boys club or something. Like you have to have a playing background or you have to have some kind of connection to get to where you are. Howie Roseman had none of that. Like he literally is just the epitome of hard work and just obsession. Um, so growing up, like his parents didn't watch sports, didn't really pay attention, didn't care. His dad took him to like a Jets game because I think he begged him to go. His son, Howie, begged him to go. And when other kids are like dreaming of like being on the field, he was dreaming of being the general manager even when he was like 12 years old. He's like, I want to run a team like the Jets. I think that was his dream was to run the Jets someday. So he begged, like I think he made his first like negotiation, he says, like of making his dad buy season tickets to the Jets games. That was like his first like path to negotiating. Um, and so like all through his life, like his early life, all the way through college, like when people didn't obsess over the NFL draft when he was in college, he was building like full on like draft boards for all 7 rounds and like posting up in his dorm room. Like his roommate I think now is like with the Arizona Cardinals, his college roommate. And he said like how he was just like relentless in college, like building these draft boards. He had no reason to do this. And he sent like I think he sent letters to every NFL team for like 3 or 4 years straight of just like trying to find his way in. Started out as an intern, worked his way up with the Eagles, and now he is where he is today. But it's just like he had literally zero. He just had to sell like one person on taking him as an intern, and that was Joe Banner and Jeffrey Lurie with the Philadelphia Eagles back in the day. Funny enough, Joe Banner actually tweeted about Howie right after the Super Bowl, and then I shared my story with him, like a quote from the story, and he shared it, so that was pretty cool. But he kind of just talked about how, we took the chance on Howie and like look where he is today, and it really is a testament to like you can do anything you put your mind to if you're consistent, you're dedicated, you're relentless, and you're just obsessed at the end of the day.
Yeah, again, I think it fits in with our what has become the theme of this episode, I feel like, which is you can just go and do things.
Yeah.
You mentioned that it's become popular on Twitter, but for good reason. And it's like have you seen the mid-twit meme? Like
Mm-mm.
the where it's like the two guys on either end. Basically, it's an intelligence curve, right? And you have one guy on the left who's supposed to be really dumb. You have one guy on the right who's supposed to be super intelligent, and then you have a guy in the middle who is of average intelligence. And the guy on the left will say, "Well, you can just go do things," and then the guy in the middle who's of average intelligence will say, "Well, I need a 5-year plan, and I need this. I need this, and I need to hire this person. I need to do all these things." And then the guy all the way on the right, who is of high intelligence, will also just say, "You can just go do the thing."
Yeah.
And I feel like we, I don't know, I just tend to overcomplicate everything. The story of Howie Roseman is certainly an example of someone who just put his mind to something and probably just thought to himself, like, I can just go do this. Like, I'm gonna just go do it. You with the website, with the book, me with the podcast, just go do stuff.
Especially with the internet now, you're like one message away from anyone in the world. Like you can get in touch with anyone. You can make anything happen if you just get creative and figure it out as you go. Um, that's a common theme too. Like Khalif Raymond, who I mentioned at the top with this quote, he sent like 800 plus emails to like every college in the nation. He was a undersized senior high school receiver who had just broken his ankle. He had no reason to like be a college prospect, but he turned himself into one by sending like 800 plus emails. One coach responded, or two coaches responded, and he ended up going to Holy Cross and became an NFL player. So it's like you just got to get your foot in the door and just keep pushing, and eventually you can make it happen.
Do you ever I'm curious what drives you. And uh, I can tell that you're very passionate about what you're doing, and you're very passionate about bringing these stories to light. But when you sit back and think to yourself, like, what drives me? Like, what keeps me going? What is that for you?
That's a tough question. I think ever since I was a kid, like I attribute it to my like athlete background. Like I always felt like I had to work harder than everyone else, like on the field at least, like off in the off season. I remember like winter workouts in high school. I was like this very small guy compared to everyone else, and like a compliment from a coach saying like you're the hardest worker here, or like why is this little freshman outworking this like big senior who's like the stud, like why is this happening right now, like those, like I kind of thrived off of that, like knowing that I'm like outworking people. And I think this has become my new obsession, is like after baseball ended, like this has become my next like baseball in life. And I feel like it really is kind of like my purpose of like pushing these stories out there and growing this as big as it can be. um, and even like the new like way, like my new physical outlet is going to the gym and like progressing, getting stronger, and I think it's just that mindset of like pushing yourself to get better, and like why would I not try to be as good as I can be, or as strong as I can be, or make this company as big as it can be. Like why else would I be here on earth other than to make stuff happen. So I think that's kind of the drive.
Yeah, I love that, man. I There was a Twitter thread that I saw this morning. which I highly recommend. I honestly, I'll send it to you directly because it's one of
Awesome.
the best threads I've seen recently. It's a little morbid. The guy basically had pre-written it. He was dying of cancer, and
We
he
see the same things. I just read this before coming on here.
okay,
Yeah,
yeah. I
yeah,
mean, amazing, right? Just
yeah, it was.
and there was one quote in here that stuck out to me. He says, "You are alive, so be alive. Love recklessly, dream wildly, speak truthfully. Do not wait for the perfect moment, create it. Do not wait for life to give you meaning, carve it into the universe, with your passion." I mean, what more to say than
Hmm.
just that? And you know, the reason I asked you about motivation is it's something that I've been thinking about a lot recently. When I think about my own journey, it's like what motivates me, what keeps me going, what like why do I keep doing the things that I do? And I feel like that quote describes at least some of it, where it's like, dude, you have this life that you get one shot at. Why not go create something beautiful? Why not go chase whatever dream you have? And to go back to like the whole high agency thing that we discussed earlier, high agency people, they create what they want out of life, right? Like life doesn't happen to them. Low agency people, life happens to them. High agency people, they go out and create. They go create a life that they want. So not to get too sappy here, but like I just think that quote specifically, and then tying it into the whole, your purpose and all that, it just, why not go do it?
Yeah, and it's like, how do you want to be remembered? Like, I'm
Mm.
thinking about it now. Like, my dad is the one who instilled in me like the love for baseball and like the drive to like work as hard as possible. He's worked his ass off my whole life, um, and he's like my hero, my role model. And what do I want to be to my kids? Like, I want to set that same example to them and like show them you can do whatever you put your mind to in life. That's what my parents always taught me, and I kind of want to carry that with me and like be a living example of that and pass that on to, my kids, my family, and anyone who comes across my work. I want them to be inspired to do something great in their own life too.
Love it, man. A couple more stories to round us out, and then we'll finish off the podcast. Local newspapers refused to print his stats. Now he's a top NFL running back.
Josh Jacobs was living in a car with his father. His dad is honestly his dad is a hero for all the sacrifices he made for him. If you dig into his story, um, Josh Jacobs was putting up insane numbers, so crazy that like newspapers just didn't believe it because like coaches sometimes will fudge the stats. Like I kind of came across that like in my high school career. Like I saw that they can kind of fix the books to make certain guys look good to college recruiters, and for whatever reason, this newspaper didn't believe it until they went out and saw it for themselves. He had no idea like how to get recruited. Um, and that's another one where it's like, why are you covering like an Alabama running back first round draft pick in your book? How is he an underdog? Every guy you can find these stories. Like this guy really did have the card stacked against him, despite doing every possible thing he could on the field. He had like so many things working against him, and he didn't have any excuses, and he made it happen. And I think there's a guy like this mysterious figure that like came across his highlight tape and was like, why are you not sending this out to coaches, and kind of like did that for him and then like disappeared. So I don't know who this guy is, but like we talk about him in the story, um, and that kind of kickstarted his career in Alabama. Like Nick Saban found him somehow, and the rest is history.
Yeah, it reminds me. I read there's a fantastic biography on Hakeem Olajuwon, and I had the author on the podcast, and kind of similar to like this mysterious guy. Like there was this mysterious guy in Africa at the time, and he had seen Hakeem play, and I'm forgetting the exact details of the entire story, but essentially he brought Hakeem to the United States, and I think he was the one who contacted the University of Houston and said, "Hey, I have this guy that I think would be great." But then essentially disappeared, and like nobody can find him. People are pretty sure that he's not dead, but I mean,
Yeah.
there's no trace of him. Nothing. Like he just completely disappeared. So it's still a mystery to this day.
Dude, I don't know if you do this already, but I think you've read so many great books. Like you should have like a book list or something out there for your listeners to get into? Because I would love just like a list of these great sports biographies because I'm looking for new stuff to read all the time.
That's not a bad idea. Yeah, I might have to start that. I mean, I was also thinking of doing maybe a newsletter or something, but we can maybe
Yeah,
talk about
yeah,
that
definitely.
offline. But
Love
yeah.
to.
Um, all right. I think I'm gonna do one more story here because we're coming up on an hour, and I don't want to hold you hostage for too long here. This one stuck out to me. This beer truck driver became an all pro.
Yeah, and that's one of those headlines that kind of just grabs your attention. But it is a true story. Like I had no idea who this guy was, and one of my readers of my newsletter reached out and was like, "You should cover Michael Lewis. They call him the Beer Man in New Orleans." So I believe the story goes that I might not get all these details right. So definitely this will be my hard plug for the book. Pick up the book. Um, but I believe in high school, I hope I'm not confusing this, but in high school, I believe he had a child, um, and was kind of like he couldn't focus on sports anymore. He wanted to raise his child. So he went to work immediately out of high school and was kind of like he was always a good football player. So he kind of was like playing in semi-pro leagues around New Orleans area. Um, and eventually like this team, this like, one of those like little spring league or like indoor league teams popped up in the area, and some of his like league mates in his like semi-pro league were like, you should go out for the team. He ends up making the team and becoming the best player on that team, all while he is working for Budweiser as a beer truck driver. So every day he's like driving right past the Superdome in New Orleans and like not realizing that a few years later he'd be there playing. Um, so he's delivering beer, he's playing semi-pro football or pro football at this point, indoor league, and word gets out eventually he gets a tryout with the New Orleans Saints, somehow fights his way to make the team. He was like their return specialist, and I believe he ended up becoming an NFL All Pro. And he's like known, he's like a legend in New Orleans, basically to Saints fans, but a lot of NFL fans who are just kind of casual fans don't know his name and don't know his story. So really, really one of my favorites that I've covered over the years.
I mean, that's fantastic. And the stories that we've covered today are just scratching the surface of what you'll find in the book. Again, The Underdog Mentality by Tyler O'Shea. Pick it up on Amazon. We'll have the link in the description. Just as a teaser, some of the other stories in the book: the sandwich shop employee went from the deli counter to anonymous Super Bowl champion. Let's see, this zero-star recruit spent 18 months working minimum wage jobs on his road to the NFL. This 300-pound late bloomer who traveled 6,000 miles to accidentally make NFL history. I mean, the list goes on and on. There's so many great stories in there. One thing that I always think about, not always because it would drive me crazy, but from time to time I think about is another book that I read. Maybe I really should start this book list. Fantastic biography on John Elway. And for people who listen to the podcast often, they're probably sick and tired of me saying this story. But so John Elway was his family lived up in Washington State, and he was starting to get into football. But the issue was that the high school football team that he was on did not throw the ball a lot. They were run first team, run heavy. And so he didn't really get to showcase a lot of his skills. By blind faith, I guess, or blind luck, his dad took another job in LA and moved the family down to Southern California. And John Elway gets put in this high school that is like pass first, air the ball out, just crazy offense. And that's where basically John Elway becomes John Elway, or at least the talent of John Elway first gets discovered. And if you go look at, I'm pretty sure you can find on YouTube like high school highlights of John Elway, and it's like the most insane high school highlights you'll ever see from a quarterback. He's like throwing the ball 70 yards down the field, like doing these pirouettes and just launching it into the end zone. Like it's
It's
just
crazy.
wild. But all that to say, like with his story, with a lot of the stories that we covered, with the stories on Joker Mag in the book, I often think about like how many things need to happen a certain way
Hmm.
for an athlete to get to where they are. And in the same light, how many things didn't happen for certain athletes who never made it? Is there a player that's better than LeBron or Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant out there that just, a few things didn't fall his way. So it's just one thing that is kind of always top of mind. It's like just life is just crazy the way it works sometimes.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Like they always say, like if you're talented or enough, they'll find you, but that's not always the case. And like there are guys that, maybe aren't as talented who, we talk about in the book or we talked about today, like that just willed their way into the league, basically. And, those guys make up a good portion of every pro sports league that we watch.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many stories too, and I'm forgetting the exact ones, but and their names, which is unfortunate. But there, there's this one basketball player out in New York who was like called the King of New York, and he was the best thing New York has ever seen from a talent perspective. And there was this basketball camp where he played against LeBron, and LeBron beat him, but he said that LeBron hit a couple lucky shots, whatever. But for example, like that guy never made it to the
Hmm.
league. He just never it just never happened for him. So like I always think about stories like that where it's like people who had all this talent and for some reason a lot of times it's stuff that's out of their control happens and then they
Hmm.
kind of don't end up fulfilling that potential. But Tyler, listen, well, this has been great. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation.
Me
Obviously,
too.
you're doing a lot of great work and a lot of work that I am personally a fan of, and work that I believe in. We joked around before recording this, and we talked about it on the podcast. We have similar views about today's sports media landscape. So, obviously, I'm a big fan, and excited to see where Joker Mag goes to next. So, kudos to you, man.
Thank you. I really appreciate you reaching out and having me on. And I definitely want to stay in touch. I think we have a lot that we can, share and help each other with.
No, absolutely. Before you go, I got one last question for you. We've covered a ton of stories today. Is there one story that we maybe didn't cover, or maybe a personal favorite of yours that you want to share?
Yeah, my personal favorite is an easy answer. It's chapter one of the book about Vernon Turner. I haven't published it anywhere else. It's only in the book, and that's for a good reason. I think it is one of, if not the greatest underdog story I've ever researched and covered. Talking about books, I read his autobiography as a part of the research process for this one, and your mind will be blown when you read this.
Love it. Love it. What a way to end. Tyler, thanks again for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Nick.